On this video, I'm going to carry on reading from the essays written by Waldo Emerson. They were written in the 19th century. I'm now up to we're actually on page 365. And this next set of essays is called Character. Before I start reading, I want to start off by thanking you for joining me. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to join me as I read this amazing book. It's a book on spirituality. It's a book on self-empowerment. It's a book on emancipation of the self. And it's a very powerful book. I'm going to carry on reading this book now. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Please leave your feedback. Please leave your thoughts. Please leave your thoughts, your comments. Please press the like or dislike emoji. I look forward to hearing from you. Character by Waldo Emerson. Character. The sun sets, but set not his hope. Stars rose, his faith was earlier up. Fixed on the enormous galaxy, deeper and older seemed his eye, and matched his sufferance sublime. To tack eternity of time, he spoke, and words more soft than rain brought the age of gold again. His action won such reverence sweet, as had all measure of the feet. Work of his hands, he nor commends nor grieves, pleads for itself the fact, as unrepenting nature leaves her very act. I have read that those who listened to Lord Chatham felt that there was something finer in the man than anything which he said. It has been complained of our brilliant English historian of the French Revolution that when he has told all his facts about Mirabeau, they do not justify his estimate of his genius. The Gracchi, Aegis, Cleomens, and other Plutarch's heroes do not in the record of facts equal their own fame. Sir Philip Sidney, the Earl of Essex, Sir Walter Raleigh are men of great figure and of few deeds. We cannot find the smallest part of the personal weight of Washington in the narrative of his exploits. The story of the name Scylla is too great for his books. The inequality of the reputation to the works of the anecdotes is not accounted for by saying that the reverberation is longer than the thunderclap, but somewhat resided in these men which begot an expectation that outran all their performance. The largest part of their power was latent. This is that which we call character, a reserve force which acts directly by presence and without means. It is conceived as a certain undemonstrable force, a familiar of genius, but whose impulses the man is guided, but whose counsels he cannot impart, which is company for him, so that such men are often solitary, or, if they chance to be social, do not need society, but can entertain themselves very well alone. The purest literary talent appears at one time great, at another time small, but character is of stellar and undiminishable greatness. What others effect by talent or by eloquence, this man accomplishes by some magnetism. Quote, half his strength he put not forth. End quote. No. Did I read that correctly? Yeah. Quote, half the strength he put not forth. His victories are, end quote, his victories are by demonstration of superiority and not by crossing bayonets. He conquers because his arrival alters the face of affairs. Quote, "Oh, Iole, how did you know that Hercules was a god?" End quote. Quote, because, end quote, answered Iole. Quote, "I was content the moment my eyes fell on him. When I beheld Theseus, I desired that I might see him offer battle, or at least guide his horses in the chariot race. But Hercules did not wait for a contest. He conquered whether he stood or walked or sat or whatever thing he did." End quote. Man ordinarily a pendant to events, only half attached, and then awkwardly to the world he lives in. And these examples appears to share the life of things, and to be an expression of the same laws which control the tides and the sun numbers and quantities. But to use a more modest illustration and nearer home, I observe that in our political elections, with this element, if it appears at all, can only occur in its coarsest form. We sufficiently understand its incomparable rate. The people know that they need in their representative much more than talent, namely the power to make his talent trusted. They cannot come at their ends by sending to Congress a learned, acute, and fluent speaker, if he be not one who, before he was appointed by the people to represent them, was appointed by Almighty God to stand for a fact, invincibly persuaded of the fact in himself, so that the most confident and the most violent persons learn that here is resistance on which both impudence and terror are wasted, namely faith in a fact. The men who carry their points do not need to inquire of their constituents what they should say, but of themselves, the country which they represent. Nowhere are its emotions or opinions so instant and true as in them. Nowhere so pure from a selfish infusion. The constituency at home hearkens to their words, watches the colour of their cheek, and therein, as in a glass, dresses its own. Our public assemblies are pretty good tests of manly force. Our frank countrymen of the West and South have a taste for character, and like to know whether the New Englander is a substantial man, or whether the hand can pass through it. The same motive force appears in trade. There are geniuses in trade as well as in war, or the state, or letters. And the reason why this or that man is fortunate is not to be told. It lies in the man. That is all anybody can tell you about it. See him and you will know as easily why he succeeds. As if you see Napoleon, you'd comprehend his fortune. In the new objects, we recognize the old game, the habit of fronting the fact and not dealing with it at second hand through the perception of somebody else. Nature seems to authorize trade as soon as you see the natural merchant, who appears not so much a private agent as a factor and minister of commerce. His natural probity, combined with his insight into the fabric of society, to put him above tricks, and he communicates to all his own faith that contracts are of no private interpretation. The habit of his mind is of reference to standards of natural equity and public advantage, and he inspires respect and the wish to deal with him, both for the quiet spirit of honor which attends him, and for the intellectual pastime which the spectacle of so much ability affords. This immensely stretched trade which makes the capes of the Southern Ocean, his wharves and the Atlantic Sea, his familiar port, centers in his brain only, and nobody in the universe can make his place God. In his parlor, I see very well that he has been at hard work this morning, with that knitted brow and that settled humor, which all his desire to be curious cannot shake off. I see plainly how many front acts have been done, how many valiant noes have this day been spoken, when others would have uttered ruinous yeas. I see, with the pride of art and skill, of masterly arithmetic, and power of remote combination, the consciousness of being an agent and playfellow of the original laws of the world. He too believes that none can supply him, and that a man must be born to trade, or he cannot learn it. The virtue draws the mind more when it appears in action. To ends not so mixed, it works with most energy in the smallest companies and in private relations. In all cases, it is an extraordinary and incomputable agent. Excess of physical strength is paralyzed by it. Higher natures overpower lower ones by affecting them with a certain sleep. The faculties are locked up and offer no resistance. Perhaps that is the universal law. When the high cannot bring up the low to itself, it benumbs it, as men charms down the resistance of the low animals. Men exert on each other a similar occult power. How often has the influence of a true master realized all the tales of magic? A river of command seemed to run down from his eyes into all those who beheld him, a torrent of strong, sad light, like an Ohio or Danube, which pervaded them with his thoughts and colored all events with the hue of his mind. What means did you employ? I'll repeat that. Quote, what means did you employ? End quote, was the question asked of the wife of Cockney in regard to her treatment of Mary of Medici, and the answer was, quote, only that influence which every strong mind has over a weak one. End quote. Cannot Caesar an iron shuffle of the iron off the irons and transfer them to the person of Hippo or Thraso, the turnkey? Is an iron handcuff so mutable a bond? Suppose a slaver on the coast of Guiana should take on board a gang of Negroes, which should contain persons of the stamp of Toussaint L'Ouverture, or let us fancy under these swarthy masks he has a gang of Washingtons in chains. When they arrive at Cuba, will the relative order of the ship's company be the same? Is there nothing but rope and iron? Is there no love, no reverence? Is there never a glimpse of right in a poor slave captain's mind? And cannot these be supposed available to break or elude or in any manner overmatch the tension of an inch of iron ring? This is a natural power, like the light and heat, and all nature cooperates with it. The reason why we feel one man's presence and do not feel another's, is as simple as gravity. Truth is the summit of being. Justice is application of it to affairs. All individual natures stand in the scale according to the purity of this element in them. The will of the pure runs down from them into other natures, as water runs down from a higher into a lower vessel. The nature force is no more to be withstood than any other natural force. We can drive a stone upward for a moment into the air, but it is yet true that all stones will forever fall. And whatever instances can be quoted of unpunished theft or of a lie which somebody credited, justice must prevail, and it is the privilege of truth to make itself believed. Character is this moral order seen through the medium of an individual nature. An individual is an enclosure. Time and space, liberty and necessity, truth and thought are left at large no longer. Now the universe is a close pound. All things exist in a man tinged with the manners of his soul. With what quality is in him, he infuses all nature that he can reach. Nor does he tend to lose himself in vastness, but at how long a curve soever, all his regards return into his own good at last. He animates all he can, and he sees only what he animates. He encloses the world as a patriot does his country, as a material basis for his character and a theatre for action. A healthy soul stands united with the just and the true, as a magnet arranges itself with the pole, so that he stands to all beholders like a transparent object betwixt them and the sun, and whose journeys towards the sun journeys towards that person's. He is thus the medium of the highest influence to all who are not on the same level. Thus men of character are the conscience of the society to which they belong. The natural measure of this power is the resistance of circumstances. Impure men consider life as it is, reflected in opinions, events, and persons. They cannot see the action until it is done, yet its moral element pre-existed in the actor, and its quality as right or wrong it was easy to predict. Everything in nature is bipolar, or has a positive and a negative pole. There is a male and a female, spirit and a fact, a north and a south, spirit and the positive. The event is a negative. Will is the north, action the south pole. Character may be ranked as having its natural place in the north. It shares the magnetic currents of the system. The feeble sound souls are drawn to the south or negative pole. They look at the profit or hurt of the action. They never behold a principle until it is lodged in a person. They do not wish to be lovely, but to be loved. Men of character like to hear of these faults. The other class do not like to hear of faults. They worship events, secure to them a fact, a connection, a certain chain of circumstances, and they will ask no more. The hero sees that the event is ancillary. They must follow it. A given order of events has no power to secure to him the satisfaction which the imagination attaches to it. The soul of goodness escapes from any set of circumstances, whilst prosperity belongs to a certain mind, and will introduce that power and victory which is its natural fruit into any order of events. No change of circumstances can repair a defect of character. We boast our emancipation from many superstitions, but if we have broken any idols, it is through a transfer of idolatry. What have I gained? That I no longer immolate a bull to Jove, to Neptune, or a mouse to Hecate? That I do not tremble before Eumenides, or the Catholic Purgatory, or the Calvinistic Judgment Day? If I quake at opinion, the public opinion as we call it, or at the threat of assault, or contumely, or bad neighbors, or poverty, or mutilation, or at the rumor of revolution, or of murder, if I quake, what matters it what I quake at? Our proper vice takes form in one or another shape, according to the sex, age, or temperament of the person. And if we are capable of fear, we'll readily find errors. The covetousness or the malignity which saddens me when I ascribe it to society is my own. I am always environed by myself. On the other part, rectitude is a perpetual victory, celebrated not by cries of joy, but by serenity, which is joy fixed or habitual. It is disgraceful to fly to events for confirmation of our truth and worth. The capitalist does not run every hour to the broker to join his advantages into current money of the realm. He is satisfied to read in the quotations of the market that his stocks have risen. The same transport which the occurrence of the best events in the best order would occasion me. I must learn to taste pure in the perception that my position is every hour ameliorated and does not already command those events I desire. That exaltation is only to be checked by the foresight of an order of things so excellent as to throw all our prosperities into deepest shade. The face which characters wears to me is self-sufficientness. I revere the person who is riches, so that I cannot think of him alone, or poor, or exiled, or unhappy, or a client, but as perpetual patron, benefactor, and beautiful man. Character is centrality, the impossibility of being displaced or overset. A man should give us a sense of mass. Society is frivolous and treads its day into scraps, its conversation into ceremonies and escapes. But if I go to see an ingenious man, I shall think myself poorly entertained. If he give me nimble pieces of benevolence inadequate, rather he shall stand stoutly in his place and let me apprehend. If it were only his resistance, know that I have encountered a new and positive quality, great refreshment for both of us. It is much that he does not accept the conventional opinions and practices. That nonconformity will remain a goad and a remembrancer, and every inquirer will have to dispose of him. And that's in the first place. There's nothing real or useful that is not a seat of war. Our houses ring with laughter and personal and critical gossip, but it helps little but the uncivil, unavailable man who is a problem and a threat to society, whom it cannot let pass in silence, but must either worship or hate, and to whom all parties feel related, both the leaders of opinion and obscure and eccentric he helps. He puts America and Europe in the wrong and destroys the skepticism which says, man is a doll, let us eat and drink, it is the best we can do. By eliminating the untried and unknown, acquiescence in establishment and appeal to the public indicate infirm faith, heads which are not clear, and which must see a house built before they can comprehend the plan of it. The wise man not only leaves out of his thought. The many, but leaves out the few. The fountains, the self-moved, the absorbed, the commanded because he is commanded. The assured, the primary, they are good. For these announce the instant presence of supreme power. Our action should not rest mathematically on our substance. In nature there are no false valuations. A pond of water in the ocean tempest has no more gravity than in midsummer ponds. All things work exactly according to their quality and according to their quantity. Attempt nothing they cannot do, except man only. He has pretension, he wishes and attempts things beyond his force. I read in a book of English memoirs, Mr. Fox, afterwards Lord Holland, said, "He must have the treasury. He had served up to it, and would have it." End quote. Xenophon and his 10,000 were quite equal to what they attempted, and did it. So equal that it was not suspected to be a grand and imitable exploit. Yet there stands the fact, unrepeated, a high watermark in military history. Many have attempted it since, and not been equal to it. It is only on reality that any power of action can be based. No institution will be better than the institutor. I knew an amiable and accomplished person who overtook a practical reform, yet I was never able to find in him the enterprise of love he took in hand. He adopted it by ear and by the understanding from the books he had been reading. All his action was tentative. A piece of the city carried out into the fields, and was a city still. And so new fact, and could not inspire enthusiasm. Had there been something latent in the man? A terrible, undemonstrated genius, agitating and embarrassing his demeanor. We had watched for its advent. It is not enough that the intellect should see the evils and their remedy. We shall still postpone our existence, nor take the ground to which we are entitled, whilst it is only a thought and not a spirit that incites us. We have not yet served up to it. These are properties of life, and another trait in the notice of incessant growth. Men should be intelligent and earnest. They must also make us feel that they have a controlling, happy future opening before them, whose early twilights already kindle in the passing hour. The hero is misconceived and misreported. He cannot therefore wait to unravel any man's blunders. He is again on his road, adding new powers and honors to his domain, and new claims on your heart, which will bankrupt you if you have loitered around, if you have loitered about the old things and have not kept your relation to him by adding to your wealth. New actions are the only apologies and explanations of old ones, New actions are the only apologies and explanations of old ones, which the noble can bear to offer or to receive. If your friend has displeased you, you shall not sit down to consider it, for he has already lost all memory of the passage, and has doubled his power to serve you. And ere you can rise up again, will burden you with blessings. We have no pleasure in thinking of a benevolence that is only measured by its works. Love is inexhaustible, and if its estate is wasted, its granary emptied, still cheers and enriches, and a man, though he sleep, seems to purify the air, and his house to adorn the landscape and strengthen the law. People always recognize this difference. We know, who is benevolent by quite other means than the amount of subscription to soup societies. It is only low merits that can be enumerated. Fear when your friends say to you what you have done well, and say it through. But when they stand with uncertain, timid looks of respect and half dislike, and must suspend their judgment for years to come, you may begin to hope. Those who live to the future must always appear selfish to those who live to the present. Therefore it was droll in The Good Rhymer, who has written members of Goth, to make out a list of his donations and good deeds, as so many hundred favors given to Stilly, to Hegel, to Chibin, a lucrative place found for Professor Voss, a post under the Grand Duke for her, a pension for Meyer, 2 professors recommended to foreign universities, etc., etc. The longest list of specifications of benefit would look very short. A man is a poor creature if he is to be measured so. For all these, of course, are exceptions, and the rule ends hodie urnum. Life of a good man is benefaction. The true charity of Goth is to be inferred from the account he gave Dr. Eckermann of the way in which he had spent his fortune. Quote, Ich bin mut of mine, has cost a purse of gold. I'll have to repeat that. Quote, each bonmot of mine has cost a purse of gold. 500,000 of my own money. The fortune I inherited, my salary, and the large income derived from my writings for 50 years back, I have been expended to instruct me in what I now know. I have besides seen, end quote, etc. I own it is but poor chat and gossip to go to enumerate traits of a simple and rapid power. And we are painting the lighting with charcoal. But on those long nights and vacations, I like to console myself so. Nothing but itself, copy it. A word warm from the heart enriches me. I surrender a discretion. How death cold is literary genius before this fire of life. These are the touches that reanimate my heavy soul and give it eyes to pierce the dark of nature. I find where I thought myself poor, there was I most rich. Hence come a new intellectual exaltation to be again rebuked by some new exhibition of character. Strange alteration of attraction and repulsion. Character repudiates intellect, yet excites it. And character passes into thought, is published so, and then is ashamed before new flashes of moral worth. Character is nature in the highest form. It is of no use to ape it or to contend with it. Somewhat is possible of resistance, and of persistence, and of creation, to this power which will foil all emulation. The masterpiece is best where no hands but nature's have been laid on it. Care is taken that the greatly destined shall lip up into life in the shade, with no thousand-eyed Athens to watch, and blazon every new thought, every blushing emotion of young genius. 2 persons lately, very young children of the Most High God, have given me occasion for thought. When I explored the source of their sanctity and charm from imagination, it seemed as if each answered, "From my nonconformity." I never listened to people's law, or to what they call the gospel. and wasted my time. I was content with the simple rural poverty of my own, and the sweetness. My work never reminds you of that. It is pure of that. And nature advertises me in such persons that in democratic America she will not be democratized. How cloistered and constitutionally sequestered from the market and from scandal. It was only this morning that I sent away some wildflowers of these wood gods. They are a relief from literature, these fresh draughts from the sources of thought and sentiment, as we read. An age of polishing criticism, the first lines of written prose and verse of a nation. How captivating is their devotion to their favorite books, whether Aeschylus, Dante, Shakespeare, or Scott, as feeling that they have a stake in that book. Who touches that? Touches them, and especially the total solitude of the critic, the Patmos of thought from which he writes, in unconsciousness of any eyes that shall ever read this writing. Could it dream on still as angels, and not wake to comparisons and to be flattered? Yet some natures are too good to be spoiled by praise, and wherever the vein of thought reaches down into the profound, there is no danger from vanity. Solemn friends will warn them of danger, of the heads being turned by the flourish of trumpets, but they can afford to smile. I remember the indignation of an eloquent Methodist at the kind admonitions of a doctor of divinity. My friends, a man can neither be praised, a man can neither be praised nor insulted, but forgive the counsels. They are very natural. I remember the thought which occurred to me when some ingenious and spiritual foreigners came to America was, have you been victimized in being brought hither? Or prior to that, answer me this, are you victimizable? As I have said, nature keeps these sovereignties in her own hands. And however pertly our sermons and disciplines would divide some share of credit and teach that the laws fashion the citizens, she goes her own gait and puts the wisest in the wrong. She makes very light of gospels and prophets, as one who has a great many more to produce and no excess of time to spare on anyone. There is a class of men, individuals, of which appear at long intervals, so eminently endowed with insight and virtue that they have been unanimously saluted as divine, who seem to be an accumulation of that power we consider. Divine persons are character born, or to borrow a phrase from Napoleon, they are victory organized. They are usually received with ill will because they are new and because they set a bound to the exaggeration that has been made of the personality of the last divine person. Nature never rhymes her children, nor makes two men alike. When we see a great man, we fancy a resemblance to some historical person and predict a sequel of his character and fortune, a result which he is sure to disappoint. None will ever solve the problem of his character according to our prejudice, but only in his own high, unprecedented way. Character wants room, but must not be crowded on by persons, nor be judged from glimpses, not in the press or affairs or few occasions. It needs perspective as a great building. It may not, probably does not, from relations rapidly. And we should not require rash explanation either on the popular ethics or on our own of its action. I look in sculpture as history. I do not think that Apollo and Jove impossible in flesh and blood, Every trait which the artist recorded is stone he had seen in life, and better than his copy. We have seen many counterfeits, but we are born believers in great men. How easily we read in old books when men were few of the smallest action of the patriarchs. We require that a man should be so large and columnar in the landscape that it should deserve to be recorded that he arose and girded up his loins and departed to such a place. Most credible pictures are those of majestic men who prevailed at their entrance and convinced the senses, as happened to the Eastern Magian who was sent to test the merits of Zarathustra or Zoroaster. Quote, when the Unani sage arrived at Balkh, the Persians tell us, Goshtap appointed a day on which the Mobeds of every country should assemble, and a golden chair was placed for the Unani sage. Then the beloved of Yezdam, the prophet Zarathustra, advanced into the midst of the assembly. The Unani sage, on seeing that chief, said, this form and this gait cannot lie, and cannot but true, and cannot lie, and nothing but truth can proceed from them. End quote. Plato said it was impossible not to believe in the children of the gods. Quote, they should speak without probable or necessary arguments. End quotes. I should think myself very unhappy in my associates if I could not credit the best things in history. Quote, John Bradshaw, end quote. Says Milton, quote, it appears like a consul from whom the faces are not to depart with the year, so that not on the tribunal only, but throughout his life, you would regard him as sitting in judgment upon kings. End quote. I find them more credible, since it is anterior information. That woman should know heaven, as the Chinese say, than that so many men should know the world. Quote, the virtuous prince confronts the gods without any misgiving. He waits 100 ages till a sage comes and does not doubt. He who confronts the gods without any misgivings knows heaven. He who waits 100 ages until a sage comes without doubting knows men. Hence the virtuous prince moves, and for ages shows empire the way. End quote. But there's no need to seek remote examples. He is a dull observer whose experience has not taught him the reality and force of magic, as well as of chemistry. The coldest precision cannot go abroad without encountering inexplicable influences. One man fastens an eye on him, and the graves of the memory render up their dead. The secrets that make him wretched, either to keep or to betray, must be yielded. Another, and he cannot speak. And the bones of his body seem to lose their collages. The entrance of a friend adds grace, boldness, and eloquence to him. And there are persons he cannot choose but remember, who gave a transcendent expansion to his thoughts and kindled another life in his bosom. What is so excellent as strict relations of amity, when they spring from this deep root? The sufficient reply to the skeptic who doubts the power and the furniture of man is in that possibility of joyful intercourse with persons, which makes the faith and practice of all reasonable men. I know nothing which life has to offer so satisfying as a profound good understanding which can subsist after much exchange of good offices between two virtuous men, each of whom is sure of himself and sure of his friend. It is a happiness which postpones all other gratifications and makes politics and commerce and churches cheap. For when men shall meet as they ought, each a benefactor, a shower of stars clothed with thoughts, with deeds, with accomplishments. It should be the festival of nature, which all things announce, of such friendship, love in the sexes, in the first symbol, as all other things are symbols of love. Those relations to the best men, which at one time we reckoned the romances of youth, become in the progress of the character the most solid enjoyment. If it were possible to live in right relations with men, if we could abstain from asking anything of them, from asking their praise or help or pity, and content us with compelling them through the virtue of the eldest laws, could we not deal with a few persons, with one person, after the unwritten statutes, and make an experiment of their efficacy? Could we not pay our friend the compliment of truth, of silence, of forbearing? Need we be so eager to seek him? If we are related, we shall meet. It was a tradition of the ancient world that no metamorphosis could hide a god from God. And there is a Greek verse which runs, quote, "The gods are to each other not unknown." End quote. Friends also follow the laws of divine necessity. They gravitate to each other and cannot otherwise. When each the other shall avoid, shall each by each be most enjoyed. Then reaction is not made but allowed. The gods must seat themselves without seneschal in our Olympus, as they can install themselves by seniority divine. Society is spoiled if pains are taken. If associates abroad a mile to meet, and if it be not society, it is a mischievous, low, degrading dangle. Though made up of the best, all the greatness of each is kept back, and every foible in painful activity, as its Olympians should meet the exchange. Snuff boxes. Life goes headlong. We chase some flying scheme, or we are hunted by some fear of command behind us. But if suddenly we encounter a friend, we pause. Our heat and hurry look foolish enough. Now pause. Now possession is required, and the power to swell the moment from the resources of the heart. The moment is all, in all noble relations. A divine person is the prophecy of the mind. A friend is the hope of the heart. Our beatitude waits for the fulfillment of these two in one. The ages are opening this moral force. All force is a shadow or symbol of that. Poetry is joyful and strong as it draws its inspiration thence. Men write their names on the world as they have filled with this. History has been mean. Our nations have been mobs. We have never seen a man. That divine form we do not yet know, but only the dream and prophecy of such. We do not know the majestic manners which belong to him, which appease and exalt the beholder. We shall one day see that the most private is the most public energy. The quality atones for quantity and grandeur of character. I'll repeat that. We shall one day see that the most private is the most public energy. That quality atones for quantity, and grandeur of character acts in the dark and succors them who never saw it. What greatness has yet appeared is beginnings and encouragements to us in this direction. The history of these gods and saints, which the world has written and then worshipped, are documents of character. The ages have exulted in the manners of a youth who owed nothing to fortune, and who has hanged at the Tyburn of his nation, who by the pure quality of his nature shed an epic splendor around the facts of his death, which has transfigured every particular into an universal symbol for the eyes of mankind. This great defeat is hitherto our highest fact. But the man requires a victory to the senses, a force of character which will convert judge, jury, soldier, and king, which will rule animal and mineral virtues, and blend with the courses of sap, of rivers, of winds, of stars, and of moral agents. If we cannot attain at a bound to these grandeurs, at least let us then homage. In society, high advantages are set down to the possessor as disadvantages. It requires the more wariness in our private estimates. I do not forgive it, my friends, the failure to know a fine character and to entertain it with a thankful hospitality, when at last that which we have always longed for is arrived and shines on us with glad rays out of that far celestial land, then to be coarse, then to be critical, and treat such a visitant with the jabber and suspicion of the streets, argues a vulgarity that seems to shut the doors of heaven. This is confusion. This is the right insanity. When the soul no longer knows its own, nor where its allegiance, its religion are due. Is there any religion but this? To know that wherever in the wide desert of being, the holy sentiment we cherish has opened into a flower, it blooms for me. If none sees it, I see it. I am aware, if I alone, of the greatness of the fact, whilst it blooms. I will keep Sabbath or holy time, and suspend my gloom and my folly and jokes. Each is indulged by the presence of this guest. There are many eyes that can detect and honor the prudent and household virtues. There are many that can discern genius on a starry track. Though the mob is incapable, but when that love which is all suffering, all abstaining, all inspiring, which has vowed to itself that it will be a wretch and also a fool, in this world sooner than soil its white hands by any compliances, come into our streets and houses. Only the pure and aspiring can know its face, and the only compliment they can pay it is to own it. Let me repeat that. Only the pure and aspiring can know its face, and the only compliment they can pay it is to own it. That's it. We finished the book called Character. That page was 380, and this is page 381. Manners. Quote, how near to good is what is fear, which we no sooner see, but with the lines on outward ear, our senses taken be. Again yourselves compose, and now but all the aptness on a figure that proportion or colour can disclose, that if those silent arts were lost, design and picture they might boast, but from you a newer ground, instructed by the heightening sense of dignity and reverence, and their true motions found. Ben Jonson. Half the world, it is said, knows not how the other half live. Our exploring expeditions saw the Fiji Islanders getting the dinner of human bones, and they are said to eat their own wives and children. The husbandry of the modern inhabitants of Garunau, west of old Thebes, is philosophical to a fault. To set up their housekeeping, nothing is requisite but 2 or 3 earthen pots, a stone to grind meal, and a mat, which is the bed. The house, namely a tomb, is ready without rent or taxes. No rain can pass through the roof, and there is no door, for there is no want of one, as there is nothing to lose. If the house do not please him, they walk out and enter another, as there are several hundreds at their command. Quote, it is somewhat singular, end quote, as Belzoni, to whom we owe this account. Quote, to talk of happiness among people who live in sepulchres, among the corpses and rags of an ancient nation which they know nothing of. End quote. In the desert of Bruco, the Rakhtibos still dwell in caves, like cliff swallows, and the language of these Negroes is compared by their neighbors to the shrieking of bats and to the whistling of birds. Again, the Bornos have no proper names. Individuals are called after their height, thickness, or other accidental quality, and have nicknames merely. But the sail, the dates, the ivory, and the gold for which these horrible regions are visited find their way into countries where the purchaser and consumer can hardly be ranked in one race with these cannibals and man-stealers. Countries where man serves himself with metals, wood, stone, glass, gum, cotton, silk and wool, honors himself with architecture, writes laws, and contrives to execute his will through the hands of many nations, and especially establishes a select society, running through all the countries of intelligent men, a self-constituted aristocracy or fraternity of the best, which, without written law or exact usage of any kind, perpetuates itself, colonizes every new planted island, and adapts and makes its own whatever personal beauty or extraordinary native endowment anywhere appears. What fact more conspicuous is modern society than the creation of the gentleman? Chivalry is that, and loyalty is that, and in English literature half the drama and all the novels, from Sir Philip Sidney to Sir Walter Scott, paint this figure. The word gentleman, which like the word Christian, must hereafter characterize the present and the few preceding centuries by the importance attached to it. Is a homage to personal and incommunicable properties? I'll repeat that. The word gentleman, which like the word Christian, must hereafter characterize the present and the few preceding centuries by the importance attached to it. Is a homage to personal and incommunicable properties. Frivolous and fantastic additions have got associated with the name, but the steady interest in mankind in it must be attributed to the valuable properties which it designates. An element which unites all the most forcible persons of every century, makes them intelligible and agreeable to each other, and is somewhat so precise that it is at once felt If an individual lacked the Masonic sign, cannot be any casual product, but must be an average result of the character and faculties universally found in men. It seems a certain permanent average, as the atmosphere is a permanent composition, while so many gases are combined only to be decompounded. Comme il faut is the Frenchman's description of good society. As we must be, it is a spontaneous fruit of talents and feelings of precisely that class who have most vigor, who take the lead in the world of this hour, and thought, far from pure, far from constituting the gladdest and highest tone of human feeling. It is as good as the whole society permits it to be. It is made of the spirit more than of the talent of men, and is a compound result into which every great force enters as an ingredient, namely virtue, wit, beauty, wealth, and power. There is something equivocal in all the words in use to express the excellence of manners and social cultivation, because the quantities are fluxional and the last effect is assured by the senses as the cause. The word gentleman has not any correlative abstract to express the quality. Gentility is mean, gentillesse is obsolete, but we must keep alive in the vernacular the distinction between fashion, a word of narrow and often sinister meaning, and the heroic character which a gentleman imports. The usual words, however, must be respected. They will be found to contain the root of the matter. The point of distinction in all this class of names, as courtesy, chivalry, fashion, and the like, is that the flower and fruit, not the grain, of the tree are contemplated. It is beauty which is the aim this time, and not worth. The result is now in question, although our words intimate well enough the popular feeling that the appearance supposes a substance. The gentleman is a man of truth, lord of his own actions, and expressing the lordship in his behavior, not in any manner dependent and servile either of persons or opinions or possessions. Beyond this fact of truth and real force, the word denotes good nature or benevolence, manhood first and then gentleness. The popular notion certainly adds a condition of ease and fortune, but that is a natural result of personal force and love, and they should possess and dispense the goods of the world. In times of violence, every eminent person must fall in with many opportunities to prove his stoutness and worth. Therefore, every man's name that emerged at all from the mass in the feudal ages rattles in our ear like a flourish of trumpets. But personal force never goes out of fashion. That is still paramount today, and in the moving crowd of good society. Men of valor and reality are known and rise. Men of valor and reality are known and rise to their natural place. The competition is transferred from war to politics and trade, but the personal force appears readily enough in these new areas. Power first, or no leading class. In politics and in trade, bruisers and pirates are of better promise than talkers and clerks. God knows that all sorts of gentlemen knock at the door, but whenever used in strictness and with any emphasis, the name will be found to point at original energy. It describes a man standing in his own right and working after untaught methods. In a good lord, they must first be a good animal, at least to the extent of yielding the incomparable advantage of animal spirits. The ruling class must have more, but they must have these. Giving in every company the sense of power, which makes things easy to be done with thought the wise. The society of the energetic class in the friendly and festive meetings is full of courage and of attempts which intimidate the pale scholar. The courage which girls exhibit is like a battle of Lundy's Lane or a sea fight. The intellect relies on memory to make some supplies, to face these extemporaneous squadrons. But memory is a base medicant with basket and badge. In the presence of these sudden masters, the rules of society must be up to the work of the world, and equal to their versatile office. Men of the right Caesarean pattern who have great range of affinity. I am far from believing the timid maxim of Lord Falkland, in parentheses, quote, that for ceremony they must go to it, since a bold fellow will go through the cunningest forms. End quote. Parentheses. And I'm of opinion that the gentleman is the bold fellow, whose forms are not to be broken through, and only that plenteous nature is rightful master, which is the complement of whatever person it converses with. My gentleman gives the law where he is. He will outpraise saints in chapel, out general veterans in the field, and outshine all courtesy in the hall. He is good company for pirates, and good with academicians, so that it is useless to fortify yourself against him. He has a private entrance to all minds, and I could as easily exclude myself as him. The famous gentlemen of Asia and Europe have been of the strong type. Saladin, Sapor, the Cid, Julius Caesar, Scipio, Alexander Pericles, and the Lord Laius personages. They sat very carelessly in their chairs and were too excellent themselves to value any condition at a high rate. A plentiful fortitude is reckoned necessary in the popular judgment to the completion of this man of the world, and it is a marital deputy which walks through the dance which the first has led. Money is not essential, but this wide affinity is, which transcends the habits of clique and caste, and makes itself felt by men of all classes. If the aristocrat is only valid in fashionable circles and not with truckmen, he will never be a leader in fashion. And if the man of the people cannot speak on equal terms with the gentleman, so that the gentleman shall perceive that he is already really of his own order, he is not to be feared. Diogenes, Socrates, and Epaminondas are gentlemen of the best blood, who have chosen the condition of poverty when that of wealth was equally open to them. I use these old names, but the men I speak of are my contemporaries. Fortune will not supply to every generation one of these well-appointed knights, but every collection of men furnishes some example of the class and the politics of this country, and the trade of every town are controlled by those hardy and irresponsible doers, who have invention to take the lead, and a broad sympathy which puts them in fellowship with crowds and makes their action popular. The manners of this class are observed and caught with devotion by men of taste. The association of these masters with each other and with men intelligent of their merits is mutually agreeable and stimulating. The good forms, the happiest expressions of each are repeated and adopted. By swift consent, everything superfluous is dropped. Everything graceful is renewed. Fine manners show themselves formidable to the uncultivated man. They are subtler signs of defense, to parry and intimidate, but once matched by the skill of the other party. They drop the point of the sword. Points and fences disappear. And youth finds himself in a more transparent atmosphere wherein life is a less troublesome game. And not a misunderstanding rises between the players. Manners aim to facilitate life, to get rid of impediments, and bring the man pure to energize. They aid our dealing in conversation as a railway aids traveling, by getting rid of all avoidable obstructions of the road and leaving nothing to be conquered but pure space. These forms very soon become fixed, and a fine sense of propriety is cultivated. With the more heed that it becomes a badge of social and civil distinctions. Thus grows up fashion, an equivocal semblance, the most puissant, the most fantastic and frivolous, the most feared and followed, in which morals and violence assault in vain. There exists a strict relation between the class of power and the exclusive and polished circles. The last are always filled or filling from the first. The strong men usually give some allowance even to the petulances of fashion. For that affinity they find in it. Napoleon, child of the Revolution, destroyer of the old noblesse, never ceased to quote Faubourg Saint Germain, doubtless with the feeling that fashion is a homage to men of his stamp. Fashion, though in a strange way, represents all manly virtue. It is virtue gone to seed. It is a kind of posthumous honor. It does not often caress the great, but the children of the great. It is a whole of the past. It usually sets its face against the great of this hour. Great men are not commonly in its halls. They are absent in the field. They are working, not triumphing. Fashion is made up of their children, of those who, through the value and virtue of somebody, have acquired luster to their name, marks of distinction, means of cultivation and generosity, and in their physical organization, a certain health and excellence which secure to them, if not the highest power to work, yet high power to enjoy. The class of power, the working heroes, the Cortez, the Nelson, the Napoleon, see that this is a festivity and permanent celebration of such as they. As fashion is funded, talent is Mexico, is Marengo, and Trafalgar beaten out thin. That the brilliant names of fashion run back to such busy names as their own 50 or 60 years ago. They are the sowers, their sons shall be the reapers, and their sons in the ordinary course of things must yield the possession of the harvest to new competitors with keener eyes and stronger frames. The city is recruited from the country. In the year 1805, it is said, every legitimate monarch in Europe was imbecile. The city would have died out rather than exploded long ago. But that it was reinforced from the fields, it is only country which came to town day before yesterday. that is city and court today. Aristocracy and fashion are certain inevitable results. These mutual selections are indestructible. They provoke anger in the least favored class, and the excluded majority revenge themselves on the excluded minority by the strong hand and kill them. At once, a new class finds itself at the top. As certainly as cream rises in a bowl of milk, and if the people should destroy class after class until two men only were left, one of these would be the leader and would be involuntarily served and copied by the other. You may keep this minority out of sight and out of mind, but it is tenacious of life and is one of the estates of the realm. I am the most struck by this tenacity. When I see its work, it respects the administration of such an important matters that we should not look for any durability in its rule. We sometimes meet men under some strong moral influence as a patriotic, a literary, a religious movement, and feel that the moral sentiment rules man and nature. We think all other distinctions and ties will be slight and fugitive. This of case of fashion, for example, it comes from year to year and see how permanent that is. In this Boston or New York life of man, where too it has not the least countenance on the law of the land. Not in Egypt or in India, a firmer or more impassable line. Here are associations whose ties go over and under, and through it a meeting of merchants, a military corps, a college class fire club, a professional association, a political, a religious convention. The persons seem to draw inseparably near. If that assembly once dispersed, its members will not in the year meet again. Each returns to his degree in the scale of good society. Poor clean and remains poor. Porcellian. Porcellian remains porcellian. And earthen. The object of fashion may be frivolous or fashion may be objectless, but the nature of this union and selection can be neither frivolous nor accidental. Each man's rank in that perfect graduation depends on some mystery in his structure or some agreement in his structure to the symmetry of society. It stores on bar instantaneously to a natural claim of their own kind. A natural gentleman finds his way in and will keep the oldest patrician out who has lost his intrinsic rank. Fashion understands itself a good breeding and personal superiority of whatever country readily fraternize with those of every other. The chiefs of savage tribes have distinguished themselves in London and Paris by the purity of the tournure. To say what good of fashion we can, it rests on reality, and hates nothing so much as pretenders. To exclude mystified pretenders and send them into everlasting Coventry, it is its delight. We contemn in turn every other gift of men of the world, but the habit even in little and the least matters of not appealing to any but our own sense of propriety constitutes the foundation of all chivalry. There is almost no kind of self-reliance, so it be sane and proportioned, which fashion does not occasionally adopt and give it the freedom of its saloons. A sainted soul is always elegant, and, if it will, pass unchallenged into the most guarded drink. But so will Jock the teamster, pass in some crisis that brings him thither, and find favor as long as his head is not giddy with a new circumstance, and iron shoes do not wish to dance in waltzes and cotillons, for there is nothing settled in manners but the laws of behavior yield to the energy of the individual. The maiden at her first ball, the countryman at a city dinner, believes that there is a ritual according to which every act and compliment must be performed, or the failing party must be cast out of his presence. Later they learn that good sense and character make their own forms every moment, and speak or abstain, take wine or refuse it, stay or go, sit in a chair or sprawl with children on the floor, or stand on their heads, or what else soever, in a new and aboriginal way, and that strong will is always in fashion. Let who will be unfashionable. All that fashion demands is composure and self-content. A circle of men perfectly well bred would be a company of sensible persons, in which every man's native manners and character appeared. If the fashion is of not this quality, he is nothing. We are such lovers of self-reliance that we excuse in a man many sins, if he will show us a complete satisfaction in his position, which asks no leave to be of mine, of any man's good opinion, but any deference to some eminent man or woman of the world forfeits all privilege of nobility. He is underlining, I have nothing to do with him. I will speak with his master. A man should not go where he cannot carry his whole sphere. A man should not go where he cannot carry his whole sphere or society with him. I will not speak. A man should not go where he cannot carry his whole sphere or society with him. Not bodily, the whole circle of his friends, but atmospherically. He should preserve in a new company the same attitude of mind and reality of relation which his daily associates draw him to, else he is shorn of his best beams, and will be an orphan in the merriest club. Quote, if you could see Vic and Vor with his tail on, end quote. But Vic Ian Vor must always carry his belongings in fashion, if not added and as honor, then severed as disgrace. There will always be in society certain persons who are mercuries of its approbation. There will always be in society certain persons who are mercuries of its approbation, and whose glance will at any time return for the curious that is standing in the world. These are the chamberlains of the lesser gods. Accept their coldness as an omen of grace with the loftier deities, and allow them all their privilege. They are clear in their office, nor could they be thus formidable without their own merits. But do not measure the importance of this class by their pretension, or imagine that a fop can be the dispenser of honor and shame. They pass also at their just rate. For how can they otherwise, in circles which exist as a sort of herald's office for the sifting of character? As the first thing man requires of man is reality, so that appears in all the forms of society. We pointedly, and by name, introduce the parties to each other. Know you before all heaven and earth that this is Andrew and this is Gregory. They look each other in the eye. They grasp each other's hand to identify and signalize each other. It is a great satisfaction. A gentleman never dodges. His eyes look straight forward, and he assures of the party, first of all, that he has been met. For what is it that we seek in so many visits and hospitalities? Is it your draperies, pictures, and decorations? Or do we not insatiably ask, was a man in the house? I may easily go into a great household where there is much substance, excellent provision for comfort, luxury, and taste, and yet not encounter there any amphitryon who shall subordinate these appendages. I may go into a cottage and find a farmer who feels that he is the man I have come to see, and fronts me accordingly. It was therefore a very natural point of old feudal etiquette that a gentleman who received a visit, though it were of his sovereign, should not leave his roof, but should wait his arrival at the door of his house. No house, though it were the Tuileries of the Escurial, is good for anyone, for anything, without a master. And yet we are not often gratified by this hospitality. Everybody we know surrounds himself with a fine house, fine books, conservatory, gardens, equipage, and all manner of toys, as screens to interpose between himself and his guests. Does it not mean as if man was of a very sly, elusive nature, and dreaded nothing so much as a full rencontre, front to front with his fellow? It were unmerciful, I know, quite to abolish the use of these screens, which are of eminent convenience, whether the guest is too great or too little. We call together many friends who keep each other in play, or by luxuries and ornaments. We amuse young people and guard our retirement, or perchance a searching realist comes to our gate, before whose eye we have no care to stand. Then again we run to our curtain and hide ourselves as Adam and the voice of the Lord God in the garden. Cardinal Caprara, the Pope's legate at Paris, defended himself from the glances of Napoleon by an immense pair of green spectacles. Napoleon remarked them, and speedily managed to rally them off. And yet Napoleon, in his turn, was not great enough, with 800,000 troops at his back, to face a pair of free-born eyes, but fenced himself with etiquette and within triple barriers of reserve. And, as all the world knows from Madame de Staël, was wont, when he found himself observed, to discharge his face of all expression. But emperors and rich men are by no means the most skillful masters of good manners. No rent roll nor army list can dignify skulking and dissimulation, and the first point of courtesy must always be truth, as really. Let me read that again. No rent roll nor army list can dignify skulking and dissimulate. I'm going to repeat that. No rent roll, no army list can dignify skulking and dissimulation, and the first point of courtesy must always be truth, as really all the forms of good breeding point that way. I have just been reading in Mr. Hazlitt's translation Montaigne's account of his journey into Italy, and am struck with nothing more agreeably than the self-respecting fashions of the time. His arrival in each place, the arrival of a gentleman of France, is an event of some consequence. Wherever he goes, he pays a visit to whatever prince or gentleman of note resides upon his road, as a duty to himself and to civilization. When he leaves any house in which he has lodged for a few weeks, he causes his arms to be painted and hung up as a perpetual sign to the house, as was the custom of gentlemen. I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to carry on my next video. Please feel free to share your thoughts, your comments, your feedback. Please let me know whether my reading style resonates with you. What do you think about the ideas I'm sharing on spirituality, on self-empowerment, self-love, not waiting and banking on the compliments of others, etc., etc. I look forward to hearing from you. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Please press the like or dislike button. And I want to wish you a beautiful day. Thank you for taking the time off from your busy day to read and listen to my amazing experience reading to you. I really enjoy it. I really enjoyed it. I look forward to hearing from you. Keep on shining a beautiful light. You're a beacon of hope, light, and love in this world. I love you. Take care. Have a lovely day.